Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 49.
San Francisco, baby. Woo! That's number 49 in a nutshell. The whole thing. All of it.
All right, take us to San Francisco, Josh.
All right, so first of all, San Francisco, apparently the official city limits, is a 7 mile by 7 mile square, which is 49 square miles.
Nice.
The city itself was born during the gold rush in 1849. The first wave of immigrants that moved there are called 49ers for the same reason.
As is the football team.
The football team is called the 49ers, and it joined the NFL in 1949.
Awesome.
There is also, this is the last one. This one's a bit of a stretch, but I like it anyway. There's a highway that runs through the gold country just outside the city. Do you know which highway that is, Ben?
Let me guess. 49?
Highway 49. There it is. San Francisco.
Excellent.
If you live in San Francisco, this is your episode. Your part of the episode is over. The rest of it is ours. So that's all you get.
Okay. Well, thanks for bringing us up to speed on the number 49. So I need to set the record straight on something we talked about last time because you do this from time to time, and it's okay that you do it. I described to you the circumstances and the execution of my son's wedding, and you wanted to be on the record having cautioned us about prematurely abandoning all of the COVID protections so that if there were an outbreak, you could be able to say, I told you so. And Josh, I must regret to inform you, there was no COVID outbreak from my son's wedding.
But you see, Ben, this is a perfect example of a time where I can always feel good about it. Because if there was a COVID
win-win for you.
Exactly. If there was a COVID outbreak, then I get the satisfaction of telling you how right I was and lording that over you for the whole episode. But if I'm wrong, then nobody gets sick.
And you can say, I'm so glad everyone's okay.
It's like, and I still get to kind of lord it because I get to do stuff like, well, you all got lucky. Dodged a bullet there.
So did your family do anything special for Father's Day this week?
I got a new pair of slippers.
Okay.
Ben, don't you laugh that hard. I work from home half the time now, and I don't want to put on real shoes when I'm just tooling around the house. And these are super
I remember
cushy.
when my kids were the age your kids are, I'm sure that there was a lot of love that came with those slippers, and I hope you enjoy them.
There was a lot of
But if I remember correctly, you also got slippers for Christmas.
Oh, those slippers, they didn't last.
Oh. All right, so you needed new slippers.
I needed new slippers, and they also came with a bunch of crudely hand-drawn art projects from my daughter. She's at that age where every half-decent scrawling on a lined notebook piece of paper should be framed and hung in a gallery for all to see.
Ooh, I need to post a meme I saw this week where some kid had drawn on the wall, and instead of washing it off, the parents framed it and put one of those little white poster board things underneath it that said, marker on latex paint 2021 by Jimmy, age 7. Yeah.
All that does is encourage them.
Well, how do you handle the deluge of every paper is important?
Oh, we have. So I built a art shelf that lives in our kitchen. It is 6 feet long. It's like a 2-inch little shelf on top, and then on the bottom, I put a bunch of those little almost clothespin hangers, and I screwed it to the wood. And there's probably 15 of them.
Ooh, do you have a first in, first out system?
Not really. We let the kids hang it up until it's full, and then after some time has elapsed, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month, depending on the actual project that's coming down, they just quietly go away. And the kids don't notice because they're not paying attention. They just see, oh, open clip, and they'll draw something and put it up in there.
Okay. Yeah, and I think most parents take advantage of the principle of their attention span, out of sight, out of mind. There's a critical mass of papers that then they just don't notice that one disappeared.
This is true. If I have to do it over, I would encourage any new parents out there, get one of those digital photo frames where you can directly upload pictures to its memory. And then whenever your kid draws a picture, put it down, take a photo of it with your phone, upload it to the scrolling digital photo frame, and then incinerate the original.
Incinerate. I was hoping you would say incinerate. I wanted you to.
Destroy forever.
Awesome. Yeah, I think my wife got me some flowers and my kids patted me on the head. But since we're on vacation at my mother's house, no one was like, bringing me breakfast in bed or clean the house for me or something like that. Because my mom always keeps her house immaculate.
Yeah, it's tough being, I imagine, living at your parents' house for the time, because the one gift that you want from your wife on Father's Day probably wasn't available.
Your priorities change based on your circumstances. Same as like when you're deployed or something like that. You just adjust to whatever the current situation is.
You hear that, listeners? That's the sound of Ben tap dancing around an uncomfortable subject.
Well, speaking of uncomfortable subjects, last time I spoke about a movie on Netflix that happened in the late 60s regarding the anti-war protests. And we'll actually talk a bit about the Vietnam War later on today. But I mentioned the title of it as The Trial of the Chicago 12 or 13. I was way off. It was The Trial of the Chicago 7.
Oh, man, you were off by almost 50%.
Yeah, so thank you, numbers guy. So if you want to watch that on Netflix, I recommend it, but you won't find it under 12 or 13. It's The Trial of the Chicago 7.
I imagine nobody was going to get to that point in the ridiculously cumbersome Netflix search query function. The Trial of... there's too many options. Forget it. I'm going to watch something else.
Okay, it would probably be the first result. And I linked to it in the show notes, but I still felt like I needed to set the record straight. Now, you had been waiting for over a month for the results of your first of 4 and the most difficult, I understand, of your certified public accountant exams.
Yes.
So you got those results this week?
I did get those results. And if you recall, when we talked about it 2 episodes ago, I think.
Yeah, you were a bit pessimistic about it.
Oh, I was absolutely sure that I bombed it. And I pulled up the results this week, and miraculously, Ben, I passed by 3 points.
Yeah, you were like the kid in Shawshank Redemption that Andy was tutoring to get his GED.
That's exactly what it felt like. It's like, I'll just throw this away. I know it's a failure. Forget it.
Yeah, like that.
That's what it was. And I'll tell you, I mentioned, I think, on the podcast specifically, that if I passed it, I would dance a jig. Well,
did you?
At that moment, yes. I threw my hands up and I did a little dance in my chair as I was sitting there at the computer. And then I couldn't help. I was just overflowing with just joy and happiness that I wouldn't have to take that test again. And I turned and I sprinted across my house to where I knew my wife was relaxing in our bedroom. And I'm a large person.
That must have been alarming for her.
Yeah. Oh, she heard me coming. I'm pretty sure, like, if she had a cup of water on the nightstand next to her, she would have bounced, like you see in Jurassic Park.
Like in Jurassic Park, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, I ran into the room, and I was so excited that I leapt into the air to, like, tackle her as she was trying to relax and read a book on our bed. And everything slowed down. As I was in midair with my arms spread wide, I saw her arms coming in to cover her torso in a self-defense position, and both of her feet curl up to catch my abdomen.
That's a good way to get punched in the face.
Well, yeah, she went into full-blown, like, self-defense mode.
Oh,
and,
man.
Like, good on her. I was immediately thrown to the side in a semi-painful, like, deflection of my momentum. But
Did that quash your enthusiasm, or were you ebullient nonetheless?
So I was super jubilant anyway, and then, like, I fell to the side and then tackled her again, and then did the the expression of my happiness. And then, because I'm getting old, like a few minutes later, then I started feeling all the ow, where did you get me? Ow.
Did you ever watch Perfect Strangers back in the 90s with Bronson Pinchot and...
in the 90s, I had other priorities, Ben. Sorry.
Okay, well, Balki Bartokomous was from, I can't remember, some fictional Eastern European country, and he says, "We shall do the dance of joy," and then they do this ridiculous jig. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's great. This is what I'm imagining you doing. So did you get a letter in the mail or an email?
Oh, no, neither. This is one of those... So after I took the test, it had to be graded by the testing facility.
Yeah, the board.
The results sent off to the state board, and once the state board certified the results, it was sent off to the national board. And I had to log into the national board portal where I have to schedule these tests to get permission to take them.
So had you been logging into this portal like once a week, hoping you would get the results, or did you get like an email notifying you your board results were available on the portal?
Ben, they don't make anything about getting your CPA certification easy. You have to chase it down every step of the way. Like, everything on the websites are super cryptic. Nothing is pushed to you. You just have to know the procedure and execute it. So somewhere in their documentation that was buried, I found that if I took my test between this date and this date, then my results would come out on or about June whatever. And so that week of the day that they said, I was just logging in every day to check and see if it was there.
Man, it's like Ralphie going out to the mailbox looking for his little Annie Oakley decoder pin.
Yes, but I wasn't disappointed because I do like the Ovaltine that they sent me.
Well, congratulations, Josh. Good job passing. So when are you going to take the next one?
Yeah, this is the thing. I was super happy for like an hour. I was like, yes, I passed the test. And then super sad. I was like, oh, I have to go back to studying for the next one.
I got to take 3 more.
Yeah, so I'm back to the hour and a half of studying 6 days a week. And if I can stay on track, if I can keep my motivation at this current level, I'll be ready to take that test in October.
Dude, that's admirable. I feel like I've lost a step mentally, getting on in my mid-40s, and I don't know that I could take on something like you're doing, so good on you.
Well, the other bad part about passing that test is now there's a ticking clock. If you don't pass all 4 tests within 2 years of each other, then you have to take the first one over. So
yeah, but we've talked about this on the podcast. What you've done is you set up a system that creates scarcity. That was episode 4, I think. Now that ticking clock actually can help you and marshal your resources and get you to focus on the task better than without it.
Well, so far, this first week back to studying, it has really worked because all I can think about is, man, if I fail even one of these next 3 tests, I'm going to be in trouble.
All right. Well, good luck with that. So
Thanks,
what have you guys been up to other than that? Are the kids out of school now?
Oh, the kids have been out of school for more than a month. They got out in early May, I think. So Nicole and I are working at home half the time. We were able to get our schedules to line up to where I'm home, working from home, the days that she's at work and vice versa.
Okay.
So,
nice. So wait, you mentioned this earlier, but I don't think you said on the cast. So is this Arizona or just both of your employers where you're on like a 50% at home, 50% in the office work schedule?
It's not the state. It's definitely not the state. Most places in Arizona are very much back to normal, like it never happened.
Right, but you guys are both the kind of work where there are actually some benefits to staying at home and they didn't go all the way back.
Well, yeah, I work for a very small accounting firm and where the owner is high-risk individual. And so, like, she locked down early and hard, and we were 100% work from home for almost the full year.
Yeah.
We're just now starting to transition back 50% in the office, 50% at home. And then she's got our schedules within the firm are balanced so that there's always at least 2 people in the office. We're doing everything that we can to maintain the safety, but still be able to see clients.
But is it just solely driven by COVID considerations, or are there other things as well?
Well, now that we were forced to do it, is she's also seeing kind of the benefits of the fact that, yeah, we can maintain productivity when we're home. And the numbers actually show that some of us are a little more productive at home than we are at work because we don't spend as much time.
That's interesting.
Well, we don't spend as much time like walking past the office and then just talking about your weekend or your day for 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm always constantly getting dragged down rabbit holes talking to her about processes, procedures, and just management type stuff. And so without that happening all the time, we actually both get more work done.
So what are you and Nicole waiting for to kind of loosen up a little bit and do some of the kind of things with the kids that you haven't for a long time?
Man, that's the $5 million question. So here's the thing is we have a hard deadline because Nicole's employer is going to have her come back full time sometime in the coming months. Like, we know it's coming down the pipe. They're already kind of pushing to have everybody back.
Yeah, but you and her have both been vaccinated.
But that eliminates the childcare problem. It's not about us getting it, Ben. Like, or whenever we're talking about this, I'm not worried about getting coronavirus.
Right.
I'm not worried about my wife getting coronavirus. I'm worried about one of us bringing it home to my high risk son.
Right.
It's always the kids. That's the consideration. So, we're with the childcare falling to pieces because I'm not going to be able to work from home full time. That's just not realistic. Either we'd have to have a sitter or we'd have to have somebody. I drop them off at somebody's house. Either way, we're opening them up for more exposure. So once the new school year starts, we are going to send our kids back to the public school in person. So that necessitates a reevaluation of the risk mitigations that we're taking, because a lot of them aren't going to make sense if their kids are going to be in school anyway. Now
Yeah, there's a whole spectrum. I mean, are you guys ready to go to Legoland?
So we are going to send the kids at least the beginning for a while. They'll go and they'll wear masks, and they'll probably get picked on from the other kids because we live in a very, very red area of the state. But it doesn't matter. And so this is not.
I've been mask shamed myself already.
I have been a couple times to get weird looks, but nobody said anything. But I think that's.
Oh no, I've been actual mask shamed.
It's a free. Why people listen?
I don't know why.
Listen, anti-maskers.
They take it personal.
Yeah, listen, anti-maskers. It's a free country. That whole thing about I don't have to wear a mask if I don't want to. Guess what? That goes the other way. I can wear a mask if I want to, all the time, forever. So
how dare you?
Ben, I will tell you right now, the next time we go to Vegas for a
Why
Grand
doesn't
Prix,
this apply to other things? Why don't the gun carriers be like, why aren't you carrying a gun? I'm offended by the fact that you're not carrying a gun.
How do you know I'm not? But this has really made me think about, and I've talked to other people that feel the same way. Like you put yourself in these situations where imagine flying across the country. Like that takes on a whole new outlook when there's a virus exists that could kill you, that is airborne, that people can have and not know about. So it's like, why would I expose myself to that kind of a risk if I don't have to? Like, I can just wear a mask over my face on the flight. I can wear a mask when I go to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and I'm surrounded by 30,000 people from all over the country who have some of the poorest hygiene of the population.
Yeah.
No
doubt that we've enjoyed an unprecedented period of freedom from the common cold and the flu and that kind of thing.
Very true. I used to get sick with just that minor cold bug all the time because my kids would bring it home from school.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't had anything like that in a year and a half.
Yeah, so we're all immune compromised.
Okay. So would you guys have something planned?
Nothing big, no. This is the thing. This is not like, okay, well, they're back at school, so forget it. We're going to go party.
Why
all
not?
Bets are off. That's not a thing. No, that is just a reevaluation of the risk mitigation that we're taking. And yes, we will accept more risk into our lives, but that doesn't mean we're going to go hog wild and crazy with it because there's no reason to. And,
okay. Well, we don't have anyone high risk in our family, so my risk matrix is way different than yours.
And that's the whole thing. And for everybody out there, like you on the podcast a couple weeks ago, it's like it never happened. It's like it's over. And I'm feeling those pressures from my social circles. But the idea here is, yes, it feels like it's over. Yes, the numbers are all down, but my kids are being forced to go in-person school in August. Why would I subject myself to any kind of increased risk until I absolutely had to? So that's why we're just going to keep everything as it was all the way up until school starts. Then we'll look at it.
Don't let them see my Facebook feed because we are like that country song, "Live Like You Were Dying" over here.
just yeah, right. Just like live like you were dying. What is it? What does that look like as an LDS family?
You would not believe my life that for the last 3 weeks. Like after we got here and it was like, all right, the boys' wedding is in 2 days, so it was all focused on the wedding. Then once the wedding was over, we went into full blown binge all of the fun of summer vacation we haven't had in the last year and a half all at once. We had fireworks at the park where we just walked over to the golf course and sat there and it was like big fireworks in the sky. I bumped into an old friend who works in Hollywood for animation production studios, and he's now a professor at my university here in the Valley. So he brought my kids down to the studio on campus, and they got a tour, and they got all excited about going to college. Yes, thank you. We went up to Idaho, and they have so out in the middle of the desert, there's these canals that are made out of concrete where the water's traveling maybe 10 miles an hour, and they're just out in the middle of the desert. So it's hot and it's unattended, and there's this bridge that goes over them. And so we went out there, and you just jump off into the bridge in the canal, and it's like the longest lazy river in the world. It just goes and goes.
Except for when you have to get out and walk back to your car.
Yeah. Well, there's that, but it's great. So we did that. There's this farmer in Idaho that used to farm sod, and he built these like rolling hills next to his house, and he covered them in like the world's longest slip and slide, and you can go there for free. You just got to call him and tell him you're coming. So we went there, we hung out all day and played on the slip and slide all day. We've been wakeboarding, we've been kayaking, we've played badminton, disc golf, we've gone swimming. My grandmother celebrated her 94th birthday. I've been high-speed go-karting. We've done so much crap. It's amazing.
You say all of this, and it does sound great, but you didn't talk about the one thing that I wanted you to talk about. Ben, you played the greatest board game ever for the first time this past week, and I want to hear about it.
Okay, so let me do an update, just like I do. I played another 4 board games since I gave the update last episode.
Okay.
So I'll save that one for last. We played a game called Happy Salmon, which is one of those little themed games. It's just a quick pickup, explain the rules in 60 seconds kind of thing. It's one of those high action, silly kind of games. Basically, everybody gets a deck of cards that are in a random order, and each card has a task that you have to perform, but you have to do it in a pair. So you stand around in a circle, everybody has a deck of cards, you flip over your top card, and it says something like high five. And you have to find someone else that's also flipped over the high five card and reach across the circle and give them a high five. And then you can discard that card. And whoever discards all the cards in their deck first wins. And so it's just this manic, crazy action. It's real easy to pick up. It's very accessible to young children and lots of fun. Happy Salmon, the namesake of the game, is you put your hand out like it's a fish and you wave it back and forth, and then you slap the other person's hand like that. It's very cute.
This game could be easily converted into an adults-only game, and I like that idea.
Anyway, keep in mind about the game Happy Salmon, if you have dogs, lock them up before you start playing the game. Dogs hate this game.
Well, because everybody's just going crazy. The energy level is probably through the roof, and the dogs don't understand what's going on.
Yes. Another game I played with my brother-in-law, who is my Fez, smoking jacket wearing, game curating, board game aficionado who beats me every game we play except Magic the Gathering. And I think I actually lost a game of Magic the Gathering to him this week. We played a game that you've probably heard of called Seven Wonders, but there's a version of Seven Wonders that's called Seven Wonders Duel. If you can't get together 5 of your closest friends to play a strategy, a 2-hour strategy board game, here's one that you can play with one person in an hour.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was great. And it's called Seven Wonders, and it's a resource management strategy game where you're trying to go through... you exist in some fictional time in the past where you're creating your wonders of the world. And so you're trying to gather resources, and you can interfere with the other person or try to outpace them or win a military victory. And it's got some great flavor that goes along with it. Like you can choose to worship gods, and they have ancient names, like Mars and Anubis and whatever. And those bring you bonuses if you're people. It's a lot of fun. It's also one of those games that my first time through playing it was so overwhelming almost. I just felt like I barely got it by the end of the time we were playing, and I'd lost. And I thought I'd need to play it 1 or 2 times more through before I really got it. So that one's kind of high on the complexity scale, but it was good. I'd recommend it. Another one that we played that I really love that's way, way lower on the complexity scale that we've talked about on the podcast before is called Splendor. Do you remember this one?
I don't remember this one.
The theme of Splendor is just that you're like producing jewelry to sell to the public, but it's in the form of a resource management game where there's 3 tiers of producing jewelry. The first tier is like gathering raw materials. The second tier is like merchants trading and transporting the materials. And the third tier is like jewelers refining it and selling it. And it's this progressive resource management thing where at first you're just trying to get mines that get jewels. And then in the next tier, you're trying to trade the jewels. And then the last tier, you're trying to sell them. But it's way, way simpler than that. The only things you have are cards that represent each of the tiers and little tokens that actually represent the resources themselves. And it's very pleasing and tactile. You have these little gems that you trade around and pass, and there's scarcity. There's lots of interaction. Really good. Highly recommend Splendor. Oh, and because there's 6 jewels that were the main format of it, they've released a version of it that's called Splendor Marvel, where instead of them being rubies and diamonds and emeralds, they're the 6 infinity stones.
Yes.
So I saw that at the game store, and I didn't need it because I already had Splendor, but I bought it, and it's sitting at the top of my closet, and I'm waiting for the right occasion to gift it to someone.
Outstanding.
Yeah. All right. So
the main
moment
event
you're waiting for. You asked me about the game Scythe. So it has the feel of like a game that started on Kickstarter.
I think it was started on Kickstarter.
It was. And yet it kind of transcends it in a way where like you can see why it was successful beyond its Kickstarter beginnings. Unlike that other game we played where you're like start in a bare room and you're fighting a lion when you're naked or whatever. I can't remember what the crap that game was. Like that game belongs in the indie never caught on Kickstarter community. But Scythe now has sold over 350,000 copies. There's 2 expansions and a kid version. The replayability is through the roof. And I got to admit, the one thing that I was really liked about this game, more so than any game I've ever played, is how elegant the interaction you have with all of the pieces of the game are.
Yes, it looks and feels super overwhelming if you don't understand what the board state is. But when it's explained to you, there really isn't a lot that you have to keep track of.
Yes, exactly. Like all of the actions you can take are just like taking the little pieces on your board that have a little notch they fit into and moving it from one place where there's a notch to another place where there's a notch. So, they don't get scattered all over the place and you don't got to count them. It's just, if I move it from here to here, that's an improvement and I've improved my position.
Very cool. So yeah, and what how did the game play? Like when you guys were playing?
So there's a 30-minute video on YouTube you can watch about the rules. And I tried to watch it, but I can't pay attention to 30 minutes of somebody explaining the rules to me to it. I like to just dive in and try it. So the flavor of the game is like it's post-World War I, and there's all these factions that are warring for resources, but it's like this dystopian alternate world where technology has invented mechanized robots, like giant mechanized robots.
That are still fossil fueled power. The word that you're looking for is diesel punk.
Okay, diesel punk. All right, I didn't know that was the term, but yes. And so it's kind of this cool hook that draws you in and helps you assimilate all of the mechanics. Okay, I get it. The war just ended. There's a lot of anarchy amongst these different groups, kind of a vacuum of power. They're all trying to get to this factory and they're building up, and you could win by just having better production of food, or you could win by producing a better military, or try to take a balanced strategy. And this game has some good elements of like how you select your leader and how you get the type of, I don't know what to call it. It's almost like your alignment and character class that you just are randomly given that can influence the strategy you should take to try to be successful in the game.
Yes, every turn you take a standard set of actions. But at the beginning of the game, you randomize how effective the different actions are for you specifically. So one game, it might really benefit you to do this, to do like military action, whereas the next game, it really benefits you a lot more if you just do the farming actions.
Right, and so it rewards you if you're the kind of player that is flexible instead of always likes to play the same kind of strategy.
Yes. I the first time I played Scythe, I sat in my corner of the map and I just harvested all the wheat, Ben. I had all the wheat, and everybody was laughing at me because they were fighting and doing all the fun fancy stuff, and I won that game by a mile.
Yeah, and maybe you thought that was great. Next time I'll just harvest all the wheat again, and you could get a different starting position. That might not be the right strategy, so it's best to be flexible.
Yes, you have to think and adapt on the fly.
So it took us just shy of 2 hours, and I think we had 5 players, which was reasonable. Is about what I expected. I think it could probably be closer to an hour the second time, where there's no explaining and questioning. And we messed up a few things, but I think the overriding rule I needed to remember about that game is trust the elegance of the pieces in the board. Like everything, if you just understand why it is where it is on your board, it simplifies how much stuff you have to remember.
Yes, the game board keeps track of who's currently winning, keeps track of when the game is going to end, how, like, everything about everything that you're doing, and it's all just right in front of you.
Yeah, you don't got to memorize it. It's not as overwhelming as it seems at first. So that one is kind of a weird game, unlike Axis and Allies or something where there's just infinity tiny pieces that you have to memorize everything about on the board or read some microscopic print on your reference card. It's relatively straightforward. You just got to trust the board, and it was fun. I would definitely like to play it again. So we'll put that on our list for next time we're together.
Outstanding. We my play group, the handful of people that I can get to play these kinds of games, they were so enamored. Well, specifically, my dad was so enamored with the game after we played it 2 times that he purchased not only the expansion, but also the custom money tokens that you can get. Like the default game comes with little cardboard punch outs of the different
Yeah,
money.
I get that. People like to do that where they buy little things to help them organize it or upgrade it.
Oh yeah, we replaced all those cardboard tokens with actual steel currency that's different colors and different sizes and different like styles.
All the mechs that you get are specific to each faction, but they come unpainted. I imagine you could paint them.
I haven't painted mine yet, but that is on my giant long list of things I want to do someday.
Yeah.
That game is great. One of my favorites of all time.
Yeah. Recommended. Definitely recommended.
Wonderful. Well,
so
it sounds like you've been having a wonderful time on your summer vacation.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few other things because also it's just been a little bit of Americana. Like I said, it's starting to feel like COVID's over now, and we've just enjoyed driving across the country. Went to Wyoming where my grandmother grew up, and went to the cemetery where my great grandmother was buried, and then we went downtown to where they have this antler arch made out of elk antlers that goes over the highway into this little drive-in that looks like you flash back to 1955. You pull up and they come out and take your order, but then they do it on an iPad.
I didn't realize they had a national monument to animal cruelty in that thing.
Hey, there's no proof that those are from animal cruelty. Elks lose their antlers naturally every season.
Sure. Okay. Keep telling your kids that, Ben.
These are Schrodinger's antlers, Josh.
They both came from and didn't come from elk that were horribly murdered.
Right. Yeah. And another thing I've had occasion to do while I was out here is we came to Utah a year ago under COVID, and we just kind of came and visited my parents and left. No disease transmission or anything like that. And this time I was kind of catching up, and what I usually do is I put an alert out on social media and I get together with people. And it's funny because I have friends I've collected from each generation. Like on this trip, I've gotten together with friends from high school, friends from college, friends from my first tour in the military, second tour in the military, and it's been great. So many cool things, so many common experiences people have been up to. Just all my parents, my siblings, my wife's siblings, high school friends, college friends, military friends. It's just been fantastic. I love it. I'm going to be sad to go back to work.
You're genuinely making me feel jealous over here because I'm not the outgoing social guy. So you're talking about all your other friends, and I'm just.
Well, you were on my list too.
I'm just in here in lockdown. Like I get to talk to you every 2 weeks. That's like the highlight of my social calendar. I invited you to come out here.
You just didn't.
And Ben's just like behind my back, seeing all these other friends of his. Like I didn't even know these friends existed.
Okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive another 300 miles south of where I am right now, which is only like 50. The only thing between you and me will be the Grand Canyon at that point.
Oh, yeah, it's just that thing. Hop, skip, and a jump. No big deal. Don't you dare. Like, seriously, don't you dare drive down here. Like, it is horribly hot and terrible
I know.
right now. Don't come down
I know. We've already rented the Airbnb. The whole family's going to be there. All 33 of us are going to be at this place in St. George, Utah.
Well, that'll be fun. That's the. Is this the upcoming family reunion you keep mentioning?
Yep. Yeah. So I'll probably have a few more board games to add, some fun experiences to have, and yeah.
And like 600 people to meet.
Lots. It'll be great.
Neither confirming nor denying.
It is time for Bad at Logic.
Is it? Okay. Well, it is my turn this week to talk.
Yeah, we're doing a bias.
We are doing bias. And I can't help but make this joke. I'm the biased one. So here's the bias.
It's a good joke. Keep repeating it.
So, Ben, this is a running trend with this whole segment is I really like this bias. The bias that we are talking about today is the curse of knowledge.
These are good biases.
From the text, it says, once you understand something, you presume it to be obvious to everyone. Ben, I suffer from this incessantly. It happens every day, this curse of knowledge that I have, because I may have mentioned that I feel like I have a slightly above average capacity for thought and intellectual nonsense. And things...
But you think that would make you immune to this bias, not exacerbate it?
But here's the problem. To use your vernacular, I feel like I've been blessed with a strong intelligence. And it doesn't take me long to learn new things. It doesn't take me long to pick up new skills. I can read and understand and process things fairly quickly. And I just assume, and I did for the longest time in high school, it took me forever to realize that not everyone picks things up the way that I do. And it is my entire adult life interacting with other people, especially in a professional context. It has been difficult for me to have to slow down because I'm already jumping to conclusions based on information that I understand implicitly, when what I need to be doing is explaining and drawing my path for the people that I'm talking to so they can follow it in their own
I think this
minds.
is why you like Rick and Morty so much here, Rick.
Oh, All right, listeners, if you watch Rick and Morty and you don't identify with Rick, then there's something wrong with you. Like, he is the hero of the story.
That's the curse of knowledge bias. So I'm the opposite of this, Josh. Okay, wait, before I go on, would you say there's a proximity element to it? Because this does talk about there being an event where there was a time where you didn't know something and now you know it. And the bias is that you assume that other people know it because you do. But would you say, like, if it's something you only recently learned, that you're still good at recognizing that maybe not everyone knows it?
So if we're talking about things that are esoteric, random skills or random facts that are out in the world that I pick up just on the fringe because that's what I do, then you're right. I do like to try to explain, like, oh, look at this new cool thing that I found. And then I like to share it with people. But where it's caused me problems is in professional settings where there's no new skills to learn. There is just this pool of information and data. And you can pull it all into your mind and then immediately pick out the pieces that are important and then draw a path to where you need to go.
Okay. So there's just some point that passes where it becomes part of the pool.
Yeah, I guess. I was always able to skip a lot of steps in my thinking as far as like the work that needs to be done to figure out plans. And so I would come to people fully formed, ready, like, this is what we need to do. And it's plainly obvious. Like, there's no reason that you should argue with me about this.
Right. So Destin from Smarter Every Day, he has the YouTube channel, and he used to be an engineer for the Department of Defense, where he'd do like missile testing.
Yes.
And he tells this really great story where he had been doing it for like 10 or 15 years, and he was part of a group where he didn't necessarily have any kind of elevated status of authority over this group, but it was a collaborative group, and they had to do an activity where they were going to plan some missile testing activity. And he could see in the early stages of their planning that they were going to make some mistakes that he'd made in the past. And he just wanted to explain to them, hey, we just need to skip over all of this stuff that you're about to go through to the end, and here's where we're going to end up. And they didn't believe him. They struggled over it for 2 days and ended up right where he said they would.
In that situation, I would have fallen flat on my face, because instead of like encouraging and bringing everybody together, like, yes, we struggled through, but like, these are the lessons that you just have to learn, and like, we'll get through it together. I would have stood up top of the desk and been like, I freaking told you idiots 2 days ago that this was going to happen.
I think there's an important thing to be learned there. At the end of the 2 days, if someone does actually say, I told you so, and it's not just that Josh is a jerk, it's that there are times where you can actually just let go of your cognitive biases and latch onto somebody that has experience and knowledge. But there also is something important to be had in that 2 days of learning.
For them, not for me.
You can't necessarily skip over.
No, this is the problem, is you're thinking about everybody and trying to make everybody better. I'm just worried about my own little corner of the world.
I don't want to sit through 2 days of you guys arguing. I know how this is going to end up.
You guys are going to torture me with your nonsense for 2 straight days, and it's going to be a waste of my time. That's all I care about over here, Ben.
Yeah, you sound like Phil Connors on Groundhog Day. Blah 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 blah.
Ben, am I the bad guy? Like, whenever we talk about logical fallacies and biases, like, I'm the bad guy in every conversation we have.
Well, but the world needs both of us. I found that the gift I bring to the U.S. Air Force is that I resist this curse of knowledge bias. Not because I've had so many experiences in my life where I've been the ill recipient of the other end of it. When you're the person that doesn't know something and someone else is assuming that you know it. And it can cause for misunderstanding, awkwardness, poor communication, ineffective execution. Lots of really bad things come out of being on the other end of the curse of knowledge bias. So I usually assume that other people don't know things. And I try not to get into the area that you called mansplaining, where I'm just explaining everything that they actually know. But usually people are shy about this. They're defensive about it. They don't want to admit that they don't know things. But they're appreciative, sometimes, of the guy who's willing to say, hey, maybe you don't know this. Let me explain it to you.
Sometimes. Like, there's a bell curve there. There's me on one end where I'm yelling at everybody because they're dumb. And then there's you on the other end, like, oh, it's okay, you're dumb. Let me explain it to you. And sometimes that could come across as pandering. That's the risk you run.
Yeah, there's risks on both ends. That's why the world needs us both. It's the curse of knowledge.
Between the two of us, Ben, we make probably a pretty decent person.
Yeah, Jack Sprat and his wife. Okay, it is time for Bad at English.
No, it's not. You skipped over my whole bad at husbanding segment.
Oh, all right, we'll do that.
How dare you? This is very important to me, and I have to get this on the record, and you'll know why by the end of this segment. Okay. So I want to ask you a question, then. This is a strategy that I take with my wife. I've not on purpose, but just kind of on accident. Like it's been positively reinforced in my mind that this is the way that I can get what I want out of my spouse. And that is, I don't necessarily like ask her for things straight and put my foot down and say, no, I am doing this and you're just going to have to deal with it. That runs into a lot of opposition. Instead, I like to wear her down slowly, like float something in the beginning and then wait some time and then float it again. And then just keep wearing away at her resistance to it until she realizes that this is something that I really want, and then she lets it happen.
You're talking about purchases that draw on the family's resources.
That's the biggest place that I wear her down. But what I'm going to talk about specifically today is not about that. So have you ever done this to your wife?
Yeah. When you say this, one specific example comes to mind, and that was early on in our marriage, I realized that my wife and I were a mismatch on her habits for executing the laundry chore.
Okay.
She just wanted to be more particular and fussy about it than I intended to be. I kind of had this ethic of, like, I understand every single article of clothing has a tag on it telling you what its specific wash and care instructions are. But when I have 1,000 of those, I don't have time to figure.
Was she breaking it out into like the multiple different styles of laundry that needed to get done?
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so at first I was trying to be helpful with laundry, and she was like, no, don't wash those with those and do this. And I realized that I just wasn't willing to put that amount of effort into it. And I kind of had this ethic of like, look, if you're a piece of laundry in my house and you can't abide, the cold wash with the light colors, then you don't deserve to be in my house and you deserve to be ruined in my washing machine.
Ben's washing machine is Thunderdome, baby.
It filters out the laundry that doesn't belong in our family.
That's fair.
So she would give me all the instructions and I would kind of like play clueless, like, oh, oops, I didn't know. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I was doing it on purpose. I was wearing her down. So she finally reached a point either where she decided she didn't want my help with the laundry because she didn't like it when I did this, or she was willing to accept it.
That's a different thing entirely. Do something that you've been asked to do so poorly that you're never asked to do it again.
So that's one way of wearing down. The other way of wearing down is at least she stops pestering me about it.
Alicia, you deserve better. Like, just
Yeah.
you do.
All right, so what's your wear down circumstance?
All right, so we're a little late to the game on this one, and I'm worried that we're not going to have the time to execute, but I'm going to pull it out. We finally decided on what we're going to be for Halloween this year.
What do you mean you're late to the game? It's June.
Yeah, it's June. I'm freaking out over here. We should be 2 months into this already.
Yeah, Alicia can relate to this. Go ahead. So what did you pick?
So here's the thing. My wife has been fighting this for this entire 6 months, entire calendar year.
Why do you have to wear her down on this? Do you want her to wear like a bustier or something?
No. So what me and the kids all like said, like very early on, back in January, like, oh, you know what would be great for Halloween is if because we always do the group costumes every year. And so we wanted to do Hollow Knight, me and my kids.
Okay.
And that's, if for those of you who don't know,
very stylized, cel-shaded kind of drawings.
Yeah, it's a video game. It's a 2D platformer that is very pretty, very hand-drawn, and has a lot of really cool, bright, colorful, cute characters in it.
With dark lined borders.
Yeah, it's very cartoony art style, and it's very minimalistic, like just a handful of primary colors. Like, it looks really nice. Like,
so is it going to be like the Stormtroopers and you guys are just all different colors of Hollow Knight, or are there like different characters?
There are different characters, and they are distinct, and they play different roles in the game, and we've all picked the ones that we want to be. But my wife fought against it for the longest time, to the point where she was Googling and showing us different costumes in different genres. Like, oh, we could do Pokemon, and look at the costumes we could do, and showing the kids. And then
she was trying to seduce them away from the Hollow Knight option.
Yes, because she doesn't necessarily like the Hollow Knight option, because her biggest concern is nobody's going to know who we are.
Okay.
Well,
but that's the great thing about doing something obscure. It's that much more rewarding when someone gets it.
Well, and my counter argument to her was that 2 years ago we were characters from an anime called Bleach. And literally one person knew
no way Bleach is more obscure than Hollow Knight.
Bleach, yeah, exactly. Bleach has got to be more obscure than Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight at least is in gamer zeitgeist. So anyway, the way I wore her down is every couple of weeks I'd bring it up, like, the kids kind of really want to do Hollow Knight. She's like, no, nobody's going to know who we are. And we have that little back and forth, and I just let it go. Then I was like, when she wasn't around, I'd be watching like Hollow Knight speedruns on YouTube and have my kids watch with me, like at lunchtime for a couple minutes.
You were working against her. They were all on board, and you were priming the pump.
Last week,
you were feeding the flame.
I started a new playthrough of Hollow Knight and have been playing it on and off every couple of days. And yeah, finally, she just accepted and came and was like, okay, we'll do Hollow Knight, and here are the costumes we're going to be. And I was like, oh, well, as long as you're okay with it, sweetheart. But in my mind, I'm like, yes. Doing the fist
pump. Do you
pump.
accept it when she wears you down?
She doesn't have to wear me down, Ben, because she is at the point where if she says, yea, verily, this is what we are doing, I'm the guy
I'm talking about something that's important to her that's not important to you. Or maybe you're just contrary to.
There are a couple things that come to mind, but I don't, if she expresses to me, like, I would much rather her just tell me flat out, like, this is important to me, I want you to do this. And then I will adjust my way of thinking, rather than try to wear me down on it.
So on this same topic, 5 years ago, my wife decided she wanted to be, her and my daughters to all be the girls from Despicable Me 2. The surrogate mother, and then the 3 adopted girls, Agnes, Ethel, and whatever, I can't remember their names. Margot. And she wanted, I shave my head as a matter of fashion choice, and she wanted me to be Gru. They wanted to be the 4 girls, and I was going to be Gru. And I was like,
perfect and outstanding.
Yes. And she made fantastic costumes. I'll put a link in the show notes. Just beautiful, perfect Despicable Me 2 costumes, and I was the complete stick in the mud. I was just like, no thanks, I don't want to be Gru. I didn't really have anything against it, like whatever. I just didn't want to dress up for Halloween.
Gru wears like a gray suit and a big nose. Like, that's it. That is the extent of what you were being asked to do. You were being asked to put on a gray sports jacket and some boots and walk around with your hands behind your back. That was it. You party pooper.
My wife is really enjoying this part of the podcast.
Again, Alicia, you deserve better than this party pooper.
Well, I'm not. Okay, so you'd mentioned a few minutes ago the risk that the wife is weighing this against, that maybe you come up with a costume, you spend your time on it, you go out, and it's not appreciated by the masses. So I think this means your family's assuming that you'll be back to normal enough that you'll be out amongst the people by October.
Well, I mean, we trick-or-treated last Halloween right in the middle of a huge spike in coronavirus.
Were they wearing like coronavirus masks underneath the Stormtrooper masks?
Excuse me, those were Mandalorian helmets.
Mandalorian helmets?
Painstakingly handcrafted and painted, sir. And yes, actually we were. We were wearing coronavirus masks underneath our Mandalorian helmets, and we were wearing gloves
I did not even
the
think
entire
about that.
time. And we let the candy age for 24 hours before we touched it.
Okay, well, maybe they did to you like I just did to you, like, oh, aren't you a cute little stormtrooper? And your son's like, I'm a Mandalorian.
Now, Ben, you're forgetting that this was right at the height of the Mandalorian show. Like, I think season 1 had like just ended.
Okay, fine. So you were benefiting from being at the peak of pop culture. Now, I know this isn't exactly obscure, but maybe about 15 years ago, my wife did a real awesome number on some Zelda costumes. My 2 oldest sons, who were like 7 and 5, and my daughter was 3, and she did Red Link, Green Link, and Princess Zelda. Spot on, nailed it. Pointy ears and everything. And so many people were like, "Aren't you a cute little elf?"
So actually, it's funny you bring that up because Zelda was one of the things that she tried to lure us away from Hollow Knight with. And that one I was on board with. Carter, my son was going to be Link, daughter was going to be Zelda, my wife was going to be the ninja chicks that are in the
nice.
The Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. Gerudo Valley.
Gerudo Valley. No. The not the Gerudo Valley chicks, but the ninjas, the Shakira or whatever from Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
And then I was going to be, of course, Ganondorf.
What else would you be? Well, but I got to say, this is the point I was trying to get to, is that it was so rewarding in the end when, even though there were people that were saying, "Aren't you a cute little elf?" there'd be the one like college-age kid that was there volunteering at the party and be like, "Hey, nice Link costume." And my sons would be like, "Yeah," they'd hold up their Hyrulean shield and clink, swords of whatever they're called to time.
The Master Sword.
Master swords.
You're killing me, Smalls.
Maybe I'm just baiting you.
I hope so. This is Here's the thing, though, Ben. Like, I'm not going to wear these costumes for anybody else. If we get recognized, that'll be nice. But I'm going to show you. I'll send you pictures of the costumes that we've picked out. And even without people knowing what they are, they're still going to be cool costumes. Especially if you see in a group of people, all 4 wearing this like similar motif. It'll be cool without knowing what it is.
Yes, I agree. I've had that experience where you see them and you're like, those are cool costumes. I know it's something and I don't know what it is, but they're cool.
That's what I'm going for.
Well done.
I have purchased EVA foam. I have purchased a heat gun. I'm going all out. Like, we're going to make custom molded helmets. Like, I'm going to do a test run tomorrow. And again, we're in June.
All right.
I'm running out of time.
Listeners, Josh has identified his next project.
That's it.
He is on board and off to the races.
Nicole's going to do all the tailoring. I'm going to do all the helmets and the weapons. And it's going to be an uphill fight. But once I figure one of them out, the rest will flow, and it'll be great.
Well, congratulations to wearing down your wife's resistance. I feel like wearing down my wife's resistance is like silence. If you speak its name, it doesn't exist anymore.
For Nicole, who's going to listen to this podcast, sorry, not sorry. I am super stoked about these costumes. and one of the reasons that I had to get this segment into the podcast is now I am in the world, on record, in the public. Yea, verily, this is what we are doing for Halloween. So there's no backsies anymore. We're not changing ideas. This is the one.
Like you said, it takes time and planning. You got to get tools. You got to get going. Time is short. You only have 4 months.
I know. I'm on the clock, man. Like I'll get it, but it's going to be tight.
All right, your Halloween costumes and your CPA exam.
The CPA exam is going to get delayed before the costumes do.
Well, I've got a useful bad English term for you today.
Okay.
This one is chuffed. Chuffed is a term that they use to describe an emotion. It's always about yourself, usually. Like, you could say, "Ben, I'm quite chuffed. We finally settled on our Halloween costumes today," which means, like, very pleased.
I am very chuffed. Super chuffed. That doesn't sound right. Like, that sounds somewhat naughty, as the British would say.
Right. You say right chuffed.
I'm right chuffed.
Yeah.
That still sounds bad. That sounds like something I'd be saying in the pornographic industry. Hey, is Bruno chuffed yet?
No, that sounds like I need some talcum powder. I'm getting a bit chuffed. There's also a verb form of it, or the gerund chuffing, which they use as in place of the word very.
Okay, so that's chuffing amazing.
Yes, like that.
That does not roll off the tongue at all.
And hence bad at English.
The Queen's English is ridiculous.
Well, for our main segment today, you had proposed that we just do kind of a potpourri grab bag kind of thing. So we've each got a couple of topics we want to talk about, and I think we'll do them in alternating fashion. So why don't you go first?
So actually, Ben, the reason I proposed this is because when I talked to you about that, I'm like, what's our main segment? You go, oh, we don't really have one. I was in a bit of a sour mood. I was like, you know what? Let's just complain about random stuff.
Okay.
I'm just in a complainy, sourpuss, grumpy mood that day.
Did it last? Can you generate genuine complainy vibes right now? Let's have it. What's your first one?
Okay. So my first one it's not something that just annoys me, Ben. It is a genuine plague on humanity that is bringing us down as a species. Okay. And that is the idea of news versus what we actually have, which is infotainment. So the idea here being...
You got to convince me. I'm already feeling skeptical.
Oh, don't even start with me. Okay, so here's the problem. Is originally there was this thing called the news where people wanted to know what was going on in the world around them. And so these...
Okay, give me like a journalism 101 ethics, like purity of purpose and execution.
As a journalist, and you could Google this today, like they will swear up and down every like ethics class you take as a journalist is you are supposed to tell the story, impart the facts, no bias, no opinion, no speculation, no drawing conclusions. This is what happened, X, Y, and Z. That is it. It is up for the reader to decide how to interpret it. That is not what we get, sir. That is not what we get. What are you shaking?
Josh, I think we've established conclusively on this podcast that there's no such thing as without bias.
That's the problem. This is what I'm getting at. If I want to know what happened, just the facts, I have to dig. Anything that happens, you can't get a straight answer. You watch this news channel and they're going to spin it ridiculously their way. You watch another news channel, they're going to spin it ridiculously the other way. Somewhere in the middle is probably the truth, but I don't know what that is because I don't know where to find it. I have to go to the Associated Press or to some random tiny third-party site, or I've got to pick pieces out of both reports. And if you're not actively searching for what is just the facts of the matter, you're going to listen to the sound bites of whatever talking head is looking at you at the moment, and you're going to think that's what happened.
Do people really, though, Josh? I mean...
Ben, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how the January 6th insurrection, or should I say patriotic display of free speech, is being spun right now.
Man, you went straight for the worst.
Right for the jugular. That's right. No straw men about this argument. I have a real thing to point at.
So I just sent you a link. I'll put it in the show notes. It's one of my favorite things. There's this website called Ad Fontes Media, and they publish what they call the media bias chart. They're up to version 7.0, and what it creates is it's a pretty good comprehensive listing of any website you could go to get media information on the internet. And they have an objective set of rubric criteria that they apply to information presented by that site, and they aggregate it over time and they generate a rating. And their site measures the fact basis of the media and the left or right leaning of the political media. And it creates this nice little like catenary arch. And the things at the top of the arch are the most neutral politically and the most factually based. And the things at the bottom edges are the things that are the most left or right political leaning and the least factually based.
Interesting. Thank you. This tool, I will genuinely use this tool because I don't know. I live in a very red state and I'm not a very red person. And it's very frustrating to keep hearing these sound bites come out that are plainly fabrications. They feel like lies if you're looking at it from the other perspective. But to find the actual, for example, our state Senate has been going back and forth about a budget now, and everybody's up in arms about it because one side loves it, the other side hates it. And unless I go to actually read the bill, the legal verbiage. I have no idea what's actually in the thing.
Okay, but I'm still looking for you to clarify what's the difference between news and infotainment. And hear me out here for a sec, because I'm going to be antagonistic about this.
Okay.
All news is infotainment, because you're still producing a product that people have to consume. And if they don't want to hear what you have to say, or you're not telling them what they want to hear, or doing it in a way that's entertaining to them, they're just going to shut you off and you can't exist.
Exactly. You thank you. You explained it. That's it. Thank you, Ben. You've proven my point precisely. Because of the way that our medias work, there is no incentive to just report facts. There's no. I don't think it's you're saying it like it's causal. I'm saying it's reverse of that. No, it evolved into this because of the mechanics of the media system that it's in. Like, the problem though is that people still think of it and call it the news. Like, the news is supposed to be an unbiased thing where you get information. But what we actually have is what you're talking about, is this very ingrained, very high profit, very biased infotainment industry that is incentivized fiscally to keep people watching the show. Whether or not they're giving out perfectly accurate information is secondary to keeping people watching. My problem is that a lot of these things portray themselves as the other. They are infotainment, but they keep talking about how they're telling the truth.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Okay, yeah, every talking head you see on every channel, left and right, if the show has the guy's name in it, that is not the news, but people will still quote it as if that's the thing that's happening.
Yeah. So you can see on this chart that I sent you, and listeners, bring it up if you've never seen it before. I highly recommend it. You can see the things that are right at the peak of the chart that have the highest factual accuracy and the least amount of political bias. And it's stuff like the Associated Press and Reuters that are just the straight up news wires. You know, those are the things that are just going to be the most neutral and the most accurate. And there's most of what you'd expect that's above the line of factual enough, even though they're slightly right or left leaning. Like the Wall Street Journal is slightly right leaning, the New York Times is slightly left leaning, but within all of those there's a spectrum. And if you tunnel down into it, you'll see that there are things within each of those that are the opposite. But then when you get down into your Daily Kos, Occupy Democrats on the left, or Breitbart or OAN on the right, you know, it's well outside of the realm of factual accuracy and definitely far into the political leaning, to the point where they don't have any, even they're not pretending to be unbiased.
My favorite point on this whole chart is this one towards the bottom, right dead center. It's the National Enquirer. It is not left or right, but man, you cannot rely on anything that they say.
Contains fabricated info.
Excellent. So, this is a good tool, and I do like this very much, and I like how the Weather Channel is really representing there's no bias here, people. The Weather Channel is getting it right. They are just reporting the news.
It's just the weather.
It's hot in Topeka.
Okay, so what brought this up, though? You said it was the Arizona state legislature?
It's just everything that's been in the news. We have a Republican supermajority in Arizona, and so they are just pushing through the most ludicrous and ridiculous.
How's that vote recount going?
Oh, Ben, just this week they decided to take a bunch of the ballots and ship them off to Minnesota for detailed forensic analysis. Ben, that has all of my personal private information on it. They put it in
I feel like
box.
We're back in the year 2000 looking at hanging chads.
Never mind that all of these ballots were already audited by a bipartisan commission when they were originally tallied. Never mind that they went through a recount under bipartisan supervision at the time of the original recount. No, there's still got to be some kind of shenanigans here. So after the fact, when there's no legal foundation to make any changes in the future, we're going to go back and we're going to look at these again, but way sloppier and with people that are incentivized to find specific things.
Don't let me put words in your mouth here, but I feel like what you're saying you want is some type of authoritative news stream that you can count on to be the place you go to get all the facts.
No, I mean, that would be nice. But that's not...
I mean, that sounds like what the Chinese state-run media wants you to think you're getting.
So I know you were going to go down that path because we've had this pro versus anti government argument a lot. But
like, I'd rather get what the free market's giving me and have to filter through it myself than have some government person giving me what they say are the unvarnished, unbiased, clear truth facts and having to rely on them.
Okay, you're making a false dichotomy because those are not your only options. First of all.
Okay, good. Very good identification of my logical fallacy. Continue.
Second, you and I, yes, like I would want my media to be free because we have the capacity and the capability to sift through this mountain of chaff that we get to find the nuggets of the truth that are in there. Not everybody does. There are many people in this country that just take what the talking head says, and that is the gospel. That's a problem.
They're down one leg or the other of this media bias chart, and they're happy to live there.
Exactly. So I don't want a media-run organization that takes away all free speech. That's not what I want. I want some kind of a mechanism built into the system. And I don't know how that exists. I don't know if it's government regulation. I don't know if it's some kind of fiscal incentive program. I don't know how it operates. But I want these people to be held more responsible for the crap that they say. But not all of these are even American. Well, I know, and I get that. And I found reliably, consistently, one of the most unbiased news sources for American politics.
Let me guess. Al Jazeera?
Al Jazeera America is great for actually getting information. And that's a little scary sometimes. Yeah. So I don't know how this exists in this world. I want there has to be free speech. There has to be that capacity to be able to hold our government accountable for the things that they do behind closed doors. But at the same time,
I agree wholeheartedly.
People need to understand that if they are on either leg of this trough of the arc that you sent over to me, that they are not getting what is, yea, verily, the truth. They're getting a really biased, skewed version of it.
I don't see how to force that.
There isn't a way to force that, which is why I'm complaining about it.
Okay. All right. Well done. Nice rant.
You asked me if I can sum up indignant anger. Yes, Ben, 24/7. I can wake up in the middle of the night and be indignant about something.
Okay. Well done. I share your indignance, but from a completely different angle. All right. Here's mine. So I recently learned about something called Chesterton's fence. Have you ever heard of Chesterton's fence?
Never. I've never heard that term.
Great. So this is something that apparently John F. Kennedy had a penchant for quoting in his public speaking. So back in the 1920s, there was an author named G.K. Chesterton, who was a prominent Catholic, who John F. Kennedy happened to be, which is probably why he was well read in him, who also just wrote fiction. He wrote a book called The Thing, and in it there was this concept regarding, probably related to the political movement at the time, of reform, of change and reform in society. And there would be this trend we could probably relate to where somebody wants to just come in and smash whatever the previous guys had done.
Oh, that doesn't sound like anything that ever happens in politics.
Yeah. Just, we'll show that we're the new guys in town by reforming, by whatever. We're building a wall on the southern border. We don't know why or if it'll do what we're saying, but we're going to do something different. So here, I use that example specifically because that's the example in reverse that Chesterton used. Here's a quote from the Thing. There exists in such a case a certain institution or law, let us say, for the sake of simplicity, a fence or a gate erected across a road. The more modern type of reformer goes gaily up to it and says, I don't see the use of this, let us clear it away. To which the more intelligent type of reformer will do well to answer, if you don't see the use of it, I certainly won't let you clear it away. Go away and think. Then, when you can come back and tell me that you do see the use of it, I may allow you to destroy it.
Aha! I like that quite a bit. If there is some kind of organizational barrier that has been erected, or some kind of policy or procedure in place, you should probably understand why it is that way before you start deciding it's terrible.
Precisely. That is, so you can use this term, Chesterton's fence, to refer to that idea of second order thinking.
Okay.
In the context of reform.
This was one of the first lessons that I was taught in the military. I had a very wise master sergeant beat that into my head as a second lieutenant. LT, if you want to be a good officer, the first thing you'll do when you show up to a job is keep your mouth shut for 6 months.
Okay, so you took it exactly where I wanted to take it. So I realized that we have an implementation of Chesterton's fence in the military, but 6 months isn't right for an LT because sometimes you change jobs every 6 months. Maybe he did that on purpose. Like he knew you were going to change jobs in 6 months and told you to keep your mouth shut for 6 months.
Maybe when you're going to be in a job for longer than 6 months, you have the vestment to actually make good decisions. Who knows?
Maybe you can just do really thorough research and understand the purpose of the fence in the first day and already be willing to make changes. But I think there's kind of a rough order of magnitude. What would you say the right time period is for as a percentage? Like if I'm going to have this job for X amount of time, what percent of that time should I just be figuring it out before I make any changes?
My gut tells me I want to say between 5 and 10%.
Yeah, I think that's about right. So, when you're a young junior officer, you're probably only going to have a job for about 6 months. So you probably just need, a month or less to kind of understand what's going on. And then if you have something you want to change that's within the scope of your control and you can understand and explain why it was the way it was, then go ahead and make the change.
Another life lesson for everybody that wants to be a good military officer. If you're a second lieutenant and you decide you want to make changes in your organization, talk to your NCO first. I guess.
I learned some hard lessons that way.
Yeah, he will fix you before you make anything irreparable.
But there's such a tough dichotomy, too, because sometimes your crusty old NCOs are part of the problem and they don't have the fresh eyes thing. Now, of course, the lieutenant's going to think he can save the world. I have a great lieutenant that I love to this day, and I think he's a listener of this podcast. And he was fresh out of college. He came into our unit, and there were some really frustrating, terrible things about it. We were executing regional IT control over a lot of computing resources that provided email and internet access to all of the people using our networks. And it was slow and sluggish and tickets took a long time to resolve. And he saw that we needed to automate a lot of the things that we were doing. And he wanted to use his computer science skills to do that.
Oh, I can fix the world with my keyboard.
And I loved it. I was so excited about his enthusiasm and I wanted to harness it in a way that would still fit into the unfortunate limitations of the realities of the Air Force. Which is if some brilliant lieutenant comes in and writes a bunch of custom code for fixing the world's problems and then leaves after 6 months and it breaks, now you just have a bunch of broken processes and no way to fix it.
I may be guilty of doing this exact thing that you're talking about.
There has to be a sustainment plan, and that's what he wasn't seeing, and that's why I was the person telling him he needed to go away and understand Chesterton's fence before he tore it down.
I did this exact thing. Like when I went to the flying squadron, they had this really, really bad program that would take the schedule and make it into a printable format. And it had these multiple steps, and there was only one computer that the software was on that could be used, and it had to float around between offices all the time.
Yeah.
It was really bad. So I just coded a spreadsheet that took what the guys used and spit out what they needed. And without my knowledge, I built it for my 3 guys that were scheduling for this month. And without my knowledge, it spread to not only the other flights in my squadron, but to the other squadron. And I started getting phone calls like, hey, we need to make some changes to your program. How do we do it? I'm like, this was never intended to be in your office. How did you even get that?
Yeah. So you learned that lesson after the fact. Well, I think this rule can apply to anyone. It doesn't just have to be in the military. It can apply anywhere. You come to a new job. I think there's a critical time period where you're new and you're not yet part of the problem, where you can see clearly the things. And that's your opportunity to learn about the reason that the fences exist. So the second order thinking of Chesterton's fence is understand why the fence exists before you try to tear it down.
I mean, that is an excellent lesson. And that is applicable, like you said, not just to the military, but in life in general.
Yep.
I like it.
All right. What was your second rant?
All right. So my second, this is less of a rant and more of a musing. So I'm going to go less negative and more philosophical with you for a second. You with me on this, Ben?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. So this is the idea that I am constantly struggling with in my own personal self. Because while I always talk about on this podcast that I'm very utilitarian and I'm trying to increase my utility and the utility of the immediate people around me, I also intellectually, I want to have a longer view of things. I want to do things and make decisions and implement things in my life that are more impactful in the long term.
You want religion.
I don't. No, not at all. Not in any way, shape, or form.
That's what you're describing.
I'm not talking about my immortal soul. I'm talking about humanity as a species perpetuating into the future after I'm gone.
Same thing.
No. Ugh. Stop it. No. We are not turning this into another LDS discussion. I won't let it happen. Here's an example. Like we're at the point where both of our cars are getting old and they're both high mileage. And we had a scare with my...
You're considering electric vehicles, aren't you?
I have made the decision that the next vehicle that we purchase is going to be all electric. And
wow.
Part of that is...
You're not even going hybrid. You're just going straight to the electric.
Well, yes. For practicality reasons and because of the infrastructure in America as it stands today, one of our cars will always be a gas car because if we need to drive across the country, there still is not a good infrastructure in place to do that in an electric vehicle.
Yeah, and the execution isn't great either.
That might change in the future in the next 10 years, but who knows? But for now, the infrastructure is good enough for just tooling around the neighborhood, picking up the kids after school, going to the grocery store, commuting to work and back. That can be an all-electric vehicle, and it will benefit the planet in this tiny way that I have agency over. So this is my musing here, is that I'm somewhat disappointed in larger organizations, people that really have agency to make very impactful change in society and in the world as a whole, not taking a much longer view. Like there are a handful of outliers, and you hear about them all the time. I'm like Warren Buffett and his organizations are the people that have, I forget what they're called, but there is this handful of billionaires that have dedicated and promised to donate at least 50% of their income or whatever to charity every year.
That's cool. Yeah. We'll have to figure that out.
The Bill Gates Foundation, where he has donated the vast majority of his wealth to making humanity better. Like people like that. But I feel like they're in the minority. Either they're in the minority or there is a much larger silent majority that I don't hear about. American politics is really bad because everybody can only think, like all the politicians only think 4 years in
It's
chunks.
Called the Giving Pledge.
Okay. Do you want to give any details, or you just pulled that out?
There's all the prominent ones you'd think of, like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Elon Musk, those kinds of things.
Okay.
A campaign to encourage extremely wealthy people to contribute a majority of their wealth to philanthropic causes.
Whenever I guess I don't want to go down another political rant, but whenever I hear speakers, even CEOs of companies or anybody get up and start talking, people in positions of real power, and they start talking about their plans, they're always talking about what we're going to do now in the near term, in the short run, how we're going to improve profits, how we're going to make more money, how we're going to do the things that my constituents want. Nobody's ever talking about, like, we need to implement these policies in order to preserve the planet or to perpetuate the species or in order to cure the long-running diseases or problems that humanity has in 150 years. My budget that I'm laying out today in my 4-year stint in office is going to benefit humanity for the next 100 years. Nobody ever talks about that. And I get why the systems and the mechanics that we've built into all of our structures do not incentivize the very long view of the planet or of the species that way. But sometimes, like, I fear for that. I don't know. Like, there's all these existential crises, and everybody's talking about, like, climate change and global warming. But even me, Ben, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I can probably not do anything for global warming because I'll probably be dead and gone long before it starts to impact me personally.
You could just take a strict personal utilitarian view of this, that it's irrelevant.
Yes. And so it's this conflict, not just within myself, but I see it out in the world. People say that they want to do things for the greater good, but then the actions that they take are strictly on, like, well, this is what's good for me today.
So in discussions between you and I think but I'll state for our audience that I have a very libertarian, capitalistic attitude toward these kinds of questions.
Gasp!
That I think,
shock, unbelief. I cannot comprehend what you just said.
Yeah. So, the rising tide lift all boats kind of thing. I saw this animation this week that showed the amount of pollution produced by world economies. And on one half of the graph, it showed all the G7 nations in the United States. And on the other half of the graph, it showed China. And it started in like the 60s, and China's pollution was minuscule. But you can draw a pretty strong one-to-one correlation with their industrial pollution to their economic prosperity.
Well,
if you know what I
know
mean.
exactly what you're talking about. Like, I will let you land your plane on this one, but we can have this discussion in depth.
So by the year 2021, China's pollution has grown to exceed all of the G7 nations in the United States.
Yes.
And by that time, all of those nations have started to diminish. And what I've heard some people say is that now that we have polluted our way to prosperity, we want to prevent other countries from doing it.
Yes, I've heard those exact arguments. Do you have anything to add to that before I do my counter?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So yes, what you're talking about there is that we did that. We did the bad thing where we went through this fossil fuel burning industrial revolution that poured tons and tons of pollution in the air, and then we realized, oh, this is a problem. And
whoa, no. Then we realized it's a problem. We've reached the level of wealth and economic prosperity and infrastructure installation and economic development where we can have the luxury to start to transition to a more environmentally responsible.
Yes, and so then
execution.
So then the argument starts to become like, well, how come you guys got to do that to build your prosperity and wealth, but we don't get to?
And you tell us we can't do it. Yeah.
So, but here's my problem with that whole argument, and we get sucked down this rabbit hole, and politicians and ambassadors, and that's the argument that we're having. And nobody in the room stands up and says, hey, everybody, shut up. This isn't going to solve the problem. This is all just arguing in a circle. We're still in the same position. So we need to figure out a way that is equitable, that we can, yes, those are your objections. We have other priorities, whatever. Get over yourselves. Let's stop talking about how we all got here and figure out how we're going to move forward together as a species, not as this nation versus this nation, not as this economy versus this economy, but we're all stuck in this lifeboat that we call Earth. We've got to figure this damn thing out.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I think you're right.
Yeah.
No arguments there.
If I'm going to go out on a limb, I'm going to put my personal opinion, which I've never done on this podcast before. I think we should be investing a hell of a lot more into nuclear power than we currently are.
Agreed. There's this huge cognitive, psychological barrier that humanity has developed over nuclear power that we're going to have to get over if we're going to solve this problem.
I agree. It is a cheap source of electricity, of the energy that's needed.
It's cheap, it's safe, it's dense, it's readily available. It can solve all of our energy needs. There's virtually no drawbacks compared to the alternative.
All you countries that are complaining about this, just shut up, make a world council that's in charge of all the nuclear power plants at the UN, and just start building the freaking things all over the planet. They'll be centrally run, and I don't care.
This is the world economy equivalent of like the poisoned Halloween candy thing. It's like not a thing, but for some reason it just persists.
Yeah.
Like nuclear power is the safest kind of power there is in all of its history, including all of the accidents.
Yeah, agreed.
Including Chernobyl.
Yes. But you're preaching to the choir over here, buddy. I'm on board.
Yeah.
Also,
okay,
if
so
we can,
that's a great example. I don't know how to fix that. It just takes time, I guess.
But that's just
your mom's still looking through your Halloween candy for razor blades and hypodermic needles. It's never happened, but we're still doing it.
We only look at the big size candy bars. We figure the fun size are pretty safe because if a Halloween poisoner is going to go through the effort of putting them into like thousands of tiny fun sized bars, like then we deserve.
There is no Halloween poisoner, but yes, but okay. So maybe we just use it as an excuse to excise the dad tax, where we're taking out the Snickers and the Milky Ways.
Ben, you have to give your kids excuses?
But
I just take their candy.
But I'm saying that this could be an analog to the same thing that's happening in the power industry. I mean, there's a lot of people that derive the power production industry that derive political power and influence out of this fake suspicion of nuclear power.
Okay. I'll tell you what.
I'm
going to dedicate 50% of all of the earnings that I earn from this podcast, which is nothing, And I'm going to dedicate that to nuclear power. I'm going to put that in a trust, and we're going to build a power plant. It's going to be the Bad at Magic nuclear power facility. And it's going to be wonderful.
I love this idea. All right. So aside from the environment, are there any other concerns of yours you think we should be going about in the long view?
I've seen a lot of interesting things, and I've listened to a lot of interesting discussions, and I've read a couple of interesting articles about human biological aging, where there is this kind of fringe of medical science where these
could we potentially achieve immortality as a species?
Well, they're not necessarily immortality, but like incredibly extended lifespans, something on the order of 100% increase. And there's, like I said, there's this fringe of medical science that is looking at aging as if it was a disease and not just some inevitable process. And they have some very interesting ideas and hypotheses. But the problem is the idea that aging and dying of old age is so ingrained in us as a natural process that they can't get the attention or the funding that they need.
Yeah, I'll put a link to CGP Gray's video on it, which was excellent. There's biblical evidence that before the flood of Noah, there were significantly longer time spans, antediluvian. I know you're holding up your finger. Come on, just let me have that one.
You do not get to come across with biblical evidence. That is not a thing, man.
There were times in the past where people lived a lot longer than they do now, and under different environmental circumstances. Great, be skeptical.
Not a thing. Not a thing.
Anyway, I think another thing I want to add to this list of the long view you talk about a lot on this show is kind of like the Star Trek version of society, where we've achieved kind of like utopian level of harmony and peace.
Well, and in the Star Trek universe, that is achieved because specifically of replicator technology, but more generally because there is no more fighting over resources. We have mastered the collection of energy and the production of needs and wants to the point where nobody has to fight over things anymore. Nobody has to buy things anymore. Everybody just has what they need. And so we are able to, as a species, focus on the things that are more important to us.
I think it's easy to forget that in our generation, it's even become possible to think about this. Like before Gene Roddenberry, no one was talking about this. It wasn't a possibility. There was still just scarcity that no one could even imagine the end of.
Well, and honestly, I think Gene Roddenberry was drawing a vector. Like he could have just been a very smart man that saw this decrease in scarcity of time that people were having because they were earning better livings, having more free time, more disposable income, able to purchase more things in their life that they wanted, and realize that drawing that to its logical conclusion, eventually we will reach a point in history where people don't have to work 40 hours a week. They don't have to work at all. We'll just all have the things that we need, and we can really focus on priorities.
You know, we're in this weird time where we're starting to see that could actually be a possibility, but we aren't quite there yet. And so there's this weird moral space we live in where we can kind of do some things like it, but not all.
This ties into all of these rants that I have, because again, the mechanics of the society that we live in, of capitalism, of the way people get paid and the way people achieve the things that they want to have, we are incentivized in the short term to just continue to spin on this hamster wheel. Like that's just increase profits, increase production, and then the company that I work for, I can move up in and be bigger and better, and I get the things that I want. But society in general just perpetuates on this kind of 5-day work week lifestyle that we've all agreed on is the thing that happens. If everybody unanimously declared together that we can put all this aside, like this, okay, I'm starting to sound a little Marxian here as I'm saying this.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna. I don't think less productivity is gonna lead us to the utopian future.
No, I don't think less productivity will. But and I'm not talking about redistribution of resources either. We know communism is a complete and utter failure because people are inherently self-interested. But if there's a way that we can keep the self-interest in the picture, but figure out a system that is, I don't know, that lets me work 3 days a week instead of 5. That would just be better. I think everybody would agree working less and having the same lifestyle is better.
I don't know. I'm my jury's still out on that
Well,
one.
then you can be the guy that works his butt off at Starfleet and gets to be on the handful of spaceships that go out into the Gamma Quadrant. I will happily sit in my luxury mansion in the sky and just replicate whatever I want.
But until we invent replicator technology, are there enough people that are just inherently motivated to be more productive to produce enough to care for the ones that don't?
My counter argument to that is that everybody on this planet is passionate about something. And a majority of those people don't have the abundance of resources in their life to find and hone that passion. This is
I hope you're right.
This is a huge departure for me because I'm usually the one that hates humanity.
Yeah, no, I like it.
If everybody on this planet had, say, income,
this is Josh's version of spiritualism.
My version of spiritual, my faith. This is the only faith I have in humanity: is that everybody has something that they love so much that they will dedicate themselves to it willingly, and if given the time and the resources to find it, they would be better off.
I reject that theory a little bit in that I think there are also polymaths out there. You talk about how as soon as I do something new, I move on to something else. And I don't know that I'll ever find the thing. I think my thing is not having a thing.
And that's fine too. As long as you're able to fit yourself in some niche in society that allows you to float from thing to thing to thing, like kind of what you're doing now. It sounds like you would be a perfect consultant working a job at a company for 6 months and then moving on and helping somebody else with their problems.
Yeah. I like it.
There you go. That's the most...
Let's do this, people. Let's take the long, long view and create a utopian society where we have a healthy earth, peaceful existence, and people can pursue their passions.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm the one...
Yeah.
Like, this is the most positive I have ever been on this podcast. Like, this is...
Yeah, no doubt.
This is a red letter day for me.
All right.
All right, what do you got, Ben? What's your number 2 grade?
Okay, so I found this really fantastic article that broke so much from some of the traditional paradigms. It's very steeped in military doctrine and ideals and culture, but I think it applies to anyone and everything. So back in 2015, there was a couple of doctors that are at the Army War College that did a study on the U.S. Army. Their names are... Give me a second.
Do the names matter for this discussion?
I just want to say them so that they've been said.
This is a thing that old people do, is they get hung up on details. Oh, I was at this restaurant. Honey, what was the name of that restaurant? It doesn't matter to the story. Just continue.
Dr. Leonard Wong and Dr. Stephen J. Garris.
I forgot.
And I'm saying their names. You've forgotten already.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, and I'm saying their names out loud, and I'm doing it on purpose because what they did is very courageous.
Okay.
This is me giving them the Medal of Courage on the Bad and Magic podcast.
Credit where credit is due. Fair enough.
Yes. They did a study regarding what the title of the study is Lying to Ourselves, Dishonesty in the Military Profession. And they published this in the Army Journal and went very public with calling out the Army for all the lies they tell.
Oh, I'm not even gasping. Like, I'm sure everybody lies in the military all the time.
I know, but here's the thing. Since the Vietnam era, about 1998, the military has gone on to be like one of the most trusted, if not the most trusted and honorable profession you can have in the United States of America.
Yes, having been in the military, that is very misplaced, but I agree.
Yeah, and amongst the people in the military, there's a certain off-scent kind of jaded optimism that yields this fake honesty where you think you're being honest, but you're not.
Okay, you have to.
And if you challenge someone on it and say, you're a liar, they'll say, I am not. I have a great deal of integrity. I tell the truth all the time.
Okay, you're going to have to elaborate on the last one a little bit for me.
All right. Here's a quote from the paper. White lies and innocent mistruths have become so commonplace in the U.S. Army that there is often no ethical angst, no deep soul-searching, and no righteous outrage when examples of routine dishonesty are encountered. Mutually agreed deception exists in the Army because many decisions to lie, cheat, or steal are simply no longer viewed as ethical choices.
Anecdotes. Examples.
Okay, great. So there's lots of examples, one of which is I'm gonna try to steer clear of the causes and just go to the problem. The one of which is the fact that in order to generate a ready soldier, the Army has identified a training program that must be maintained. And you have to balance the training program when they're in home garrison conducting all the training with them actually being deployed to the war zone and conducting their mission, under which time they're not training. So the current program in 2015, as identified by these two doctors, required, I think it was like 279 duty days to execute. And there are only 256 duty days in a calendar year.
Yeah, that's a lie that the military tells all the time, is that, we have plenty of slack. We can always accept more responsibilities and do more things because that's going to make my record look even better.
Yeah, and you're telling that in the tone of someone that's just like knowingly jaded and just being dishonest on purpose. But that isn't the attitude of these people that were in this study. They're like, well, we're just trying to do the best we can. And they use terms like hand-waving, fudging, pencil whipping, checking the box. But they also use ones that are a little bit more manipulative, like giving them what they want, or prioritizing, or accepting prudent risk, or using good leadership. And really, it's all the same thing. It's lying because you want me to tell you that we've done all this and it's not possible to do all of it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I lied consistently all the time. At one point in my military career, I was placed in charge of ancillary training for the squadron. And as the ancillary training manager, I had login access to go into the system and see how everybody was on their training. And as a byproduct, I was able to sign myself off as having taken all of that training.
All right. So I was prepared to do this, and I wanted, just for our audience that doesn't understand what ancillary training means, here's what ancillary training means. I'm going to give you a deliberately long a list. There are four different categories of training you have to do that constitute ancillary training. Total force awareness training, selected force training, event-driven training, and expeditionary skills training. An example of total force awareness training might be information protection training, human relations training, force protection training, sexual assault prevention and response bystander intervention training, information assurance training, free exercise of religion training, government travel card abuse training, counterintelligence training, workplace violence training, No Fear Act training, survivor awareness training, homosexual policy awareness training, Joint Ethics Regulation Training Chapter 2, Lautenberg Amendment training, safety training, in-processing training, equal opportunity training, ethics training.
Okay, stop. This is
survival.
No, stop. This is a subset of one of the four categories that Ben is talking about. Like we called them CBTs, computer-based training, when I was in the military. And
they aren't all computer-based, though.
Some of them are mass briefings, and
some are in-person, hands-on.
There was hundreds of hours of computer training that you had to do. There was multiple days in any given year where the entire day that you were supposed to have off, you have to come in and sit in a room and have different people talk at you to check off these boxes. Yes, all of these things are admittedly important, but it is an insane time sink.
So we need to talk about the root cause, and there's several here, but they list three in the paper. But one, I want to give a quote. It says Army, but it could apply to anything. When it comes to requirements for units and individuals, the Army resembles a compulsive hoarder. It is excessively permissive in allowing the creation of new requirements, but also amazingly reluctant to discard old demands. The result is a rapid accumulation of directives passed down, data calls sent out, and new requirements generated.
Yep. This is that whole, it's so much easier to tack on new rules and new requirements in order to check off the boxes and meet these objectives that Congress is handing down than it is to justify going through and slashing something else. All of this stuff is extremely important. We can't remove any of it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at any one individual requirement, no one wants to say that's not important. And so it's easy to get new stuff in. It's hard to get old stuff out, and you accumulate like a hoarder.
This is the equivalent of that stupid cursive class that is still in elementary school.
Exactly. No one is forcing that question to be asked. Okay, you think this new thing is important. What are we going to stop doing in order to start doing this new thing? No one's asking that question.
Well, because
no one's calculating the overall cost.
And not only that, because the person who asks that question immediately has lost all credibility as a quote unquote good leader, because good leaders get the mission done regardless of the circumstances.
Yes, and there was a lot of that kind of language in the answers that these young company-grade officers that actually had to execute these requirements were saying. I'm just getting the job done. I'm giving them what they want. I'm keeping America safe. I'm balancing all these things you're giving me to do, and I'm making it happen.
You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Yes. Yeah, and we also, we're familiar with this kind of language. Like, how many times have you heard the, supply sergeant thing? Supply sergeant, I need you to get this for me. Okay, boss, but don't ask me about how I did it.
Don't ask me where it came from, how much it costs, or when it got here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man, I'll tell you what, Special Forces are the worst at this. When I showed up the first day I was there, Ben, I was given a duffel bag the size of myself with thousands of dollars of highly specialized equipment. They said, if you ever deploy, you will need probably some or all of this. And so we're just going to give it to you now.
Wow.
It was ridiculous.
Because they have a budget for that and they have to justify their budget. And so
if we don't spend our budget this year, then we don't get it next year. So let me take a look. Okay. You are required to know what time it is when you're deployed, so we're going to give you a $700 watch with a heart rate monitor on it because that tells the time.
Yeah. Well, there's another example of this. It's a phrase I've used before that I found very humorous, but it's a really good example of this dishonesty in the military profession. I was in a big tent and some of my stuff had gotten stolen in the tent. I'm like, how? We're in the middle of a military base in Afghanistan. The only people around me are other military people, which means these people I thought were honest and have my back in a firefight are stealing my stuff.
Well,
and I was really mad and incensed about the fact that they were stealing my stuff.
To be fair, you were housed with the Army. You weren't, no offense to anybody that's been in the Army, but come on.
So I asked a friend of mine, I couldn't even get him to get outraged with me. He was like, this is just how you do business. And he said this phrase, and I love it. There's only one thief in the Army.
Yep. You've said everyone else is just trying to get their stuff back.
Everyone else is just trying to get their stuff back. But really, that's code for there's a lot of thieves in the Army.
That's the justification for everybody steals, and it's so culturally indoctrinated that we just kind of shrug at it.
Yeah, and say nobody does.
If I started trying to enforce don't steal in my unit, that would be my whole job, and I've got other crap to do.
Now, I want to be... Okay, here's a great quote. Another officer added his perspective regarding the ancillary training. It's a systematic problem throughout the entire Army. We can probably do 2 or 3 things in a day, but if you give us 20, we're going to half-ass 15 and hope you ignore the other 5.
That is awesome. I love that. I'm taking that to work on Monday. I'm putting that in our staff meeting. This is the new mantra for my office here.
We can probably do 2 or 3 things in a day, but if you give us 20, here's what's going to happen. and it's very pragmatic. I mean, these are hard workers. They're doing the best they can. Okay, so in the piece, one of the root causes they identify is that as we're entering the information age, there's just this unending appetite for information.
Yes, everybody wants to know everything.
Before, the capacity to collect it and distribute it didn't exist, so the appetite wasn't there.
Ben, you realize that you're talking to a former drone pilot, right?
Yes.
I was at the eye of this hurricane of everybody wanting to know everything all the time.
Yeah.
It was insane, the kind of requests and demands that we were receiving, just because, and from people that had absolutely no business asking the questions that they were asking. It's just because they wanted to be a part of it or closer. I don't even know.
Yep.
It was as a former communications officer who had an understanding of how IT worked, it was nightmarish. Some of the I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but
so the Army talks about it as well, about all these kind of reports and stuff they have to generate that just become so onerous that the result has been that when an event happens, like for instance they take indirect fire, they'll just pretend it never happened because they don't want to have to do all the reporting on it. And now the leadership, in their maybe well-intentioned desire to get more information and use that to better plan how to operate, have created a situation where they're actually getting less information about things that are really happening.
I was told, when I deployed with the Army in 2008, and I was told directly by some of their lieutenants that the biggest problem they had when they were going out and like doing dangerous things was that every one of their guys in their brain had that split-second delay before they would take the actions necessary to defend themselves or do the things that they were there to do, because they had to stop and think for just that fraction of a second, do I really want to fill out the paperwork that's required every time I discharge my weapon?
Yeah. Yeah. Another example they gave is negligent discharges, which is a thing the Army takes very seriously, but sometimes it's just not that serious. You know, if you're out somewhere and your gun accidentally goes off, oh well, no one got hurt.
There was a guy whose gun went off in the clearing barrel. Like, as you're coming back on base, there are barrels.
Right. So you pointed into a place that's designated a safe place for your gun to go off accidentally.
Yes, and he discharged it into it. And that guy, his whole life was paperwork and interviews for the next week.
Yeah. Yep. So here's a great quote from an article about this. When the Army communicated through couriered papers, radios, or even telephones, there were physical and practical limits as to how much information could be requested, collected, and analyzed. The labor-intensive nature of responding to these requirements also limited their profusion, as did the inevitable time delays of an analog world. Those days are now long gone. Practical limits on reporting requirements for military leaders have disappeared in an era of email, search, shared digital communications, and unlimited bandwidth.
This is also a function of...
with no relief in sight.
Yeah, this is also a problem because there are generals that don't know their role. Like, there's a general in charge of tens of thousands of people, and when he's asking about like Sergeant Scruffy's negligent discharge, he's not doing his job right. But because he has the capacity and the capability to reach
now
down,
he can
that
get
far.
his long screwdriver.
Yes. Yeah. The ability for people at that very high levels
micromanage
to reach down super far, they'll just do it.
Yep. Now you're naturally going into the second cause that was identified in this paper, and that is careerism. You know, everyone's desire to get ahead. Now, the interesting thing this paper points out in particular is that any high-up officers that are in the Army in the general officer ranks came up through the junior officer ranks where they were doing all of this. And so there's this weird thing that's happening where the junior officers know they're not reporting the truth, and the senior officers know what they're getting isn't the truth, and nobody knows what the actual truth is.
Yeah, that...
like if I said,
that transition happens at Air Command and Staff College when you're a major. Like that you go into this building to get some kind of MAGCOM level training, and they extract the part of your brain where you remember that you're not of how to actually get the mission done, and they implant it and replace it with, well, this is the paperwork that has to happen every day.
Yeah, maybe you're right. So I know we're kind of crapping on the Army, so let's talk about the Air Force a minute. You mentioned how these information requests are just unlimited when it came to drone operations. I came from nuclear operations, and there was a very high-profile thing that happened just before this, where there were some Air Force officers that were missile operators at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. And what we do is we take the very most junior officers, we train them to sit at a console where it's just like in the movies, where there's two guys, 6 feet apart, and they both have to turn a key at the same time, and it can launch a nuclear missile. It's way, 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 way more complicated than that, but you get the idea.
Turn your key, sir! From War Games?
But before we will take them and put them on a 24-hour alert 40 feet underground in a nuclear-hardened capsule and give them control of 10 nuclear missiles, we have them certify initially and continually recertify. And in the traditional military requirement creep fashion, it's reached the point where we won't accept anything less than 100% on their certification exams. And it was out of careerism. It was out of desire to execute the mission. All these kinds of things that led to this situation where then you're taking all these people. Can you imagine if you had a classroom and you were like, okay, nobody's going anywhere until everybody gets 100 on this test? So what happened was there was the Office of Special Investigations caught someone doing drugs. They confiscated their cell phone and they stumbled into this test cheating ring.
Oh, dear.
Where I think half of the officers in this squadron of like 200 were either involved or knew about basically this distribution system that existed for the answers on these tests, because the only way to get 100% on the test every time was to cheat. And they wouldn't accept anything less than that, so that's what they were doing.
So this is interesting. You're reminding me of an incident that happened when I was a pilot. Every day that we stepped up to go fly a plane, we had to fill out a worksheet, and it was the risk management worksheet. And we had to answer questions and identify what our risk level was as a person that day. Like, are you having a good day? Are you stressed out? Did you get enough sleep? Just like, where are you as a person? It's a trap. Yeah. Are you good to go sit in a box and execute very high priority
missions? There's only one right answer, no matter what you feel like.
So here's the thing. I was always very truthful on these things. And so was one other officer that I knew that was there. And we both agreed that, like, if you're asking me these questions, then I'm going to answer it the best way, to the best of my ability. So two things came out of this. One, neither one of us was ever asked not to fly a mission because of the answers that we put on that sheet.
That's very interesting. I'm surprised by that.
But two, both of us separately were called to the carpet and be like, why are you filling out these worksheets this way? By superior officers in charge.
Because you were like smudging, you weren't pencil whipping the forms and it was making them look bad?
That's exactly what it was. And it was. People are asking me questions like why this is the way that it is. And I'm like, well, because I'm answering the questions truthfully. Do you want the truth or do you want me to lie on the form? And that, Ben, is what's called a trap for a superior officer, because he can't answer that question. He wants me to be truthful, but he actually wants me to lie on the thing.
But he wants the forms to be clean.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what this report is about. So for just the last few minutes, that's what I want to talk about, is the opportunity cost of that. For me, if I don't know, maybe you just live in this moral gray space and you just see it as the machine that you live in. There's nothing you can do about it, whatever. You know, when all those officers were caught cheating at Malmstrom Air Force Base, they busted them all for cheating, but then they also had to take a tough look at the system and say, we created this system that doesn't accept anything less than 100% on these tests, or these officers can't get promoted, they can't be certified or anything like that. And that creates this toxic environment where these kinds of things pop up, and we need to be held accountable for that as well. And that's really the kind of questions that need to be asked. Like, if I'm going to create a system where every new good idea that someone can think of gets thrown in the hopper of ancillary training that someone has to do in a year, and there's no way to get anything out of that hopper, eventually you're going to accumulate so much ancillary training that no one has any free time to do anything else.
Yes, and that's what happens. But we don't have to care about the ramifications of those decisions, because me throwing that good idea into that hopper translates into a bullet on my report, which then gets me promoted, more money, furthers my career.
Yes, and the we in that sentence you just said is people at the bottom. But if I'm at the top and I've created a system where my people are too busy doing things that they don't have time to do, and now they're lying to me about it, and I tell them that I won't accept anything other than good news about what's going on, now I've created an environment where me, as a 4-star general with strategic and important missions to conduct, am getting bad information. I don't know the readiness of my force. I don't know the wellness of my people. I don't know the availability of my troops. And how on earth can you execute your mission as a 4-star general in that kind of environment?
Oh, it's so cute that you think 4-star generals are able to actually influence those kinds of things, because they are.
I absolutely think
they do not, because they are surrounded and insulated from all of that crap by their staff, who are all looking out for themselves. The general can rant all day about, I want my troops to take less ancillary training and be more capable of fighting the mission. And his entire staff is going to keep doing the same things that they do while feeding him what he wants to hear in order to progress their own careers.
Okay, so under the Obama administration, General Mark Welsh, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, did this exact thing where he realized the toxic accumulation of all these training objectives and regulations for governing the troops, and he instituted a top-down, management-driven assessment of everything with the explicit purpose of cutting it in half or more.
Okay.
And it was somewhat successful. Definitely more successful than you or I would be filling out the feedback form and saying, I don't think this training should exist.
So did he actually cut the training in half? Did he achieve his objective?
I'm looking for a news thing off the real fast on Google, and I'm not finding something that gives a clear answer
My
on that.
bitter, jaded self says that he was probably happy cutting it down to 75%, and that since then it's probably gotten up, if not to the same level, then it's even higher than it was before.
Still, if you're a hoarder and you get a dumpster and you throw a bunch of stuff in it, you're making progress.
Yes, but that doesn't...
Just because you're still a hoarder doesn't mean that it wasn't good to get the dumpster.
Okay. I have to grant you that point. Fair enough. So where does that leave the military in general, Ben? Like, we tell ourselves these white lies, we build these systems, and these people are actively incentivized. You're talking about the cheating ring for the nuclear guys. The only reason that this stuff happens is because people are actively incentivized by the system to make these decisions. How does it end?
Yeah, I think any system is like this, that when it has its own culture surrounding it, and it finds a way to exist and still accomplish its mission in spite of these limitations, and maybe because of them in a way. There are ways to take that, like careerism and drive and stuff. Everyone kind of understands, there's phrases like there's only one thief in the army, or we're just giving them what they want, and everyone understands what they mean. They know when you send up a report of 100%, you're probably closer to 75%. They look at your 100% report and they just translate it in their head. So maybe we can just ignore all the dishonesty and let them go, let the public think the military is honest, let the guys in the military think they're honest, and go on. Maybe we're better than if we were actually telling the truth. I don't think we are.
Let me ask you a more difficult question. I'm going back to the anecdote of the cheating ring. Why was the system built in such a way that the incentive was to cheat on these tests rather than as a group or even an individual standing up and fighting for the realization that this is wrong, you guys are doing it wrong?
You mean, why weren't we more interested in their actual qualification than just the appearance of being qualified?
No, if everybody acknowledged that this was a problem, why didn't somebody die on that hill? I guess that answers my question right there, is because somebody would have to sacrifice their career in order to draw enough attention to this problem before it actually got solved, versus it's just easier to pencil whip and cheat it.
Okay, I want to finish with an anecdote from when I was in high school. So I think it was my senior year of high school, and I was in a district where they had this vocabulary system that was just this workbook that was full of blanks. And every week you get 20 new words, and you'd have to write them and write their definitions and use them in a sentence or stuff like that. And a cheating ring developed.
Okay.
Where just like one kid had the answers, or one kid would come up with the answers, and then everyone would just copy off each other's. I don't know. And there's, because there's so little choice in what actually gets written down, everyone's output's going to look exactly the same, whether you copied it or you came up with it originally. So there's no way, it's virtually impossible to detect if you cheated or not, unless you see them actively copying it. Well, one time, and I got wrapped up in it. I became part of the cheating ring. I didn't like it. I didn't find it necessary. It was just busy work. I was developing the vocabulary anyway. And so I justified the fact that I was doing this. So one week I'd grab someone's book and I was copying it, and the teacher came up behind me and saw me doing it. 2 books open in front of me, writing from one into the other.
Okay.
And called me out on the hall on it, and took, I think, a responsible teacher stance, and instead of just throwing the book at me and impersonally, but also doing it a little personally and saying, Ben, I thought you were better than this, and I'm disappointed in you. And I could have just justified it in the way all these guys in this military study did, where they were like, oh, I'm just part of the system. I'm doing what everyone before me's done. I have to live here. This isn't even dishonesty. I actually did take it kind of personal. I was like, yeah, why did I do that? Like, I am better than that. I shouldn't do that. And so when I see people asking these kinds of questions, I find it encouraging.
So that's a very personal story that you shared. But I'm willing to argue that has a lot more to do with you and your feelings in the specific circumstance based on the feedback you received from being caught. Because it took getting caught for you to have that realization. Like, you were still caught up in the system. You were still caught up in the
You're right. I was justifying it.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with these guys. They probably all thought this is how it works. This is how things get done. Right up to the point where it all came crashing down on them. That's the only time they probably even started thinking about it.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, the reason I brought this up is it doesn't just apply to the military. These kinds of things exist everywhere in society. I think we're all better off if we just try to live in a place where we don't create integrity bubbles, where we explain and justify and euphemize our way out of actually just being straight dealers with each other.
Well, and from personal experience, I can tell you the challenge there is when you identify these integrity or procedural bubbles that you're talking about, if you're the guy that points it out, you're now the party pooper. You're the guy that's ruining the party for everybody else, and you become a problem and a pariah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much what we call a whistleblower.
Yeah, it's funny how there's not a lot of whistleblowing protection in the military for stuff like that.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for this chance to rant about our ideas. As I mentioned, links in the show notes to the papers and the concepts and the diagrams and all that kind of stuff that we talked about.
Ben has papers and concepts and diagrams. I had stuff that I was mildly irritated by.
No, we'll link to that media objectivity site.
That was yours. You had that.
It's okay. So Josh, there's something I've been thinking. I think it's time we do another book review, and I was hoping we could read a book both of us have read before, but neither of us in a long time, which is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien.
J.R.R. Tolkien is a large pill to swallow, but I will accept this because it is a fantasy book, and buddy, I need some more fantasy in my life right now. I'm too neck deep in real life accounting. I need something fake.
All right, so we'll kick that one off for a couple of weeks, but we want to give the audience some advance notice. If you want to read along with this, pick up The Hobbit, and we'll be talking about that in a few weeks.
If you have never read The Hobbit, I do encourage you to at least try. Tolkien basically defined what we think of as classical fantasy, and there's a reason that he is the master, so give it a chance.
Yeah, it'll be great. And if you want to join in the discussion about the things we talked about today, weigh in. You can go on our subreddit, reddit.r/r/baditmagic, or you can go on our Facebook page and join in the discussion. Take a look at the diagrams and show notes and all those kinds of things. And always you can go to our website, baditmagic.live.
If you like what we do, please consider sharing us with a friend. If you like what we talk about, maybe your friends will too. If you really want to help us out, take your phone out of your pocket right now and give us a good rating on the podcast player of your choice. I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying it. You would be shocked at the visibility we get from those kinds of ratings. Lastly, if you can't get enough of us, if you want us to complain about random stuff forever, then please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
Great. And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.